Hi, it's Joy Foster, founder of TechPixies and the host of the Sparkle and Thrive podcast. And I'm delighted to be bringing to you today a guest who signed up for a social media course thinking, I want to learn social media, and then got the confidence to launch a kitchen. It's a kitchen cafe, and I really want to tell you all about it, but I'm going to let Amita Dinmore tell you about it. So Amita, tell us about this vision you had for the cafe, before you even were able to build it. Where did this idea come from?
It's quite a long story. Thanks, Joy. It started, I guess, about 12 years ago when I was sitting and listening to a sermon in church and realized that actually there are a lot of people who don't have a sense of belonging and wanting to do something about that. I was a school teacher and I had two young children, youngish children going into teenage children at the time. So life was very, very busy. But this idea just didn't let me go. I think my heart just said there are all these people who are more and more virtually connected, but we're losing that physical connection and that ability to have conversation and human touch. So I just carried on teaching, and because that's all you could do, right? And it wasn't until Christmas of 2017 when I just thought, right, in order to do my vision or to kind of figure out how to move forward, I needed to stop teaching. So I decided that at the end of that academic year, July 2018, I would resign. January 2018, I told my parents. My mum was also a teacher, and I was dreading telling her because she would just think I was bonkers, basically, for turning my back on a very worthwhile career. But I told her, and she was really, really supportive about me starting a cafe because I guess what I realized was that in our modern culture, a cafe is the equivalent of the well in ancient times, which was the gathering place. And we all love to go out for a coffee, right? So that was kind of how I felt creating a space for people to belong would work for me. A week after I told my mum and my dad, my mum sadly passed away. And that really cemented the idea in my head because she'd been so supportive. I just felt I really had to do it. Had no idea how. Did lots of research by going into cafes and looking at how they were set up, but I had absolutely no business sense or anything. I resigned from my job. I had nothing to go to and had a period of mourning, I suppose, because being a teacher was all I knew for 22 years by that stage. Children going through exams, so a lot of stress, a lot of mother angst, I suppose. And then gradually I kind of fell in, although that vision was still very much there, and I started to pursue how to set up a coffee shop on Google and, all that kind of stuff. And then the pandemic hit. I'd lost my best friend to cancer during that time. And I think just the determination to open this, but not really knowing how. And then the advert for the TechPixies bootcamp popped up on I think it was Facebook. I certainly didn't have Instagram at that point. So I signed up to the free bootcamp and thought, actually, there's probably more I could do. And social media was a little bit of a mystery, I suppose, to me. I did Facebook, but not much. And then following that little boot camp, there was the kind of, okay, so we have this course that you can join and it costs this much money. But if you do it before that, you can get a scholarship. And, I was too late for that because I thought too much. And then I remember texting you, Joy, and you kind of coached me through and you asked me some really challenging questions about valuing myself and why is it that I felt it was okay to value everyone else around me and not myself. And that really kind of took root, and I signed up. So that was kind of the start of my actual doing something about setting up my cafe.
That's so interesting. And part of your signing up for social media was thinking that actually that might help you with this cafe from the social media perspective. But what happened? What was the thing that actually helped you set up the cafe?
I think it was putting on brave pants. So just because I was worried about doing things didn't mean I couldn't do them. And I just needed to grit my teeth and put those brave pants on and go for it. And that was kind of corroborated by a really good friend of mine she was a physio, and she and her husband then set up a social enterprise. And she said, don't overthink, just do it. So it was great to kind of have that push, I suppose. And what I discovered, of course, when I joined the course was that it wasn't just social media, which frankly, I still don't really like very much.
I always say you're in the right place on the boot camp if you don't like social media. You know you need it, but you don't love it. Because I think, in reality, a lot of people don't like social media. But there is an element of it that is helpful for connecting with new people you've never met before. I mean, we're having this conversation because of social media, and
Yeah,
I see the good in it, but I do find, for those who don't love it, we're a perfect place to start because we can help you go beyond social media and see that there's other aspects. Really what I learned was we couldn't really sell confidence, but we could sell skills. And once people had those skills, they then had the confidence to go do the things they wanted to do. And this is a perfect example of this.
absolutely. Certainly, I found Monday mindset, the Tuesday morning coaching call. I found that so useful, just building the skills, as you say, just a few techniques just to get my life in order, because I suppose I was drifting a little bit with and quite overwhelmed with everything that was going on and how on earth to make a start. So yeah,
But you did make a start, and I know
we
I
did.
know there's people listening to this podcast because we have the hundreds of students. We're now at 963 students that we've worked with. I know, can you believe it? And I know some of the students that have just joined in the last year. I know their stories. I know where they're at, and they want to start cafes. They want to start community centers. So I would love for you to take a moment. Obviously, the TechPixies helped with the confidence and the life coaching, but there's a lot of things you had to do. Can you walk us through what it was like to actually set up the cafe, and what were some of the choices that you made that were really good, and some things you would have, tell someone to avoid doing? What were some of the lessons that you've learned from setting up a cafe? Because I know there's people listening to this they're listening to it specifically because they have the same dream, the same vision, and they would love your insight on it.
Oh wow. Okay. So I started out, like I say, by kind of Googling stuff and, figuring out people who had done it before. There was a particular book called The Daily Grind, which I found really, really helpful because it talked about location and it talked about looking at footfall. It gave ideas for how to set up your cafe, giving ideas for menus and those sorts of things, what would work. Now, the thing is that is all about running a profitable coffee shop. And my vision was not about profit, it was about people and running a space which would be self supporting, hopefully with me being paid a little bit, but a space actually for community to grow. That was really my vision. So if you want a profitable coffee shop, don't do what I did, which was ignore a lot of the advice about location, because where my cafe is at the top of a hill in a tiny village where there is nothing else. There's a church, a very small church, a dwindling church. There's no pub, there's no shop, there's nothing. But now, 2.5 years on, there's a cafe which is beginning to thrive. And actually, what I'm starting to see is regulars who come with their friends, groups that are starting to grow. So if you do want to if anyone wants to grow a community, I realize that it's all about kind of creating those groups and making contacts. And I have found that social media has helped with that, because I do try to post regularly. I'm not always very good because it run out of ideas, to be honest, and it's often the last thing. But I have found that being as regular as possible then does bring a response, definitely.
That's one thing you have done. I think you've been consistent. And I think one of the things we teach on the Superhero Bootcamp is consistency is queen. Like
Yeah.
you're better off posting once a week for 7 weeks than you are 7 days in a row and then disappearing for 7 months. Okay, keep going. What else should people do and not do when setting up a cafe?
So you need to get your environmental health stuff sorted out and put in place. I use my home kitchen for a lot of baking because the equipment where I am, it's in a community space, the village hall. So the Parish Council actually had a very similar idea to me because they wanted to use the space. And when they put their advert out, again, that's another story how I saw their advert because I don't live anywhere near Hazelwood. But when they kind of put forward what they wanted, their vision was very similar to what I had written. And actually, I had never pinned down my vision until I'd gone through the TechPixies course and I wrote down exactly what it is I wanted.
That is so huge. So you
Yeah.
wrote down your vision.
Yeah.
And then once you write it down, it started your brain starts sending the brain waves out there. This is what I want. And then so I want to know more about this advertisement. So there was an advertisement that said, this is what we're looking for. And it was almost a perfect match.
Well, it just said they wanted an enterprising individual to set up and run a cafe, a community cafe. So when I applied, the chap it was his brainchild, he then emailed me what they were looking for. And it could have, their vision and my vision could have been written by the same person.
Wow.
Which was, to me, one of those God incidences. And I wasn't the only person they interviewed. They interviewed a few other people, but I'm the person who got the job. So, or got the gig. So yeah, I'm trying to remember where I was. Yes, so I don't pay rent, it's a profit share. That's the sort of very informal arrangement. If I had to pay rent, I wouldn't be able to afford it at all. I started really small, and I think that's the important thing. Just do it, just go for it. Start with what you can do. We don't have employees, but we do have volunteers. And that's the other side of the story. That was an unexpected benefit, actually, because the volunteers are quite elderly. They're lonely people who want to kind of have something to do, a purpose, contact with people. And also recently I've got two young volunteers who are just out of school and aren't quite sure where they're going yet. So it's kind of it's wonderful for me as an ex-teacher to have that kind of contact with young people as well. What should I do and what shouldn't I? What should you do? What shouldn't you do? Don't spend money you don't have to. So keep it as lean as you possibly can. We don't have commercial coffee machines. We don't have three-phase electricity. So we kind of manage with very good home coffee machines. We try to go for the best quality we can. So it's kind of building reputation on quality and warm welcome rather than, trying to kind of reach hundreds of people and lots of money. And it seems to be working for us at the moment.
I love that. So 2.5 years, this dream is a reality, and you are using your social media. So, that's one of the ways that you're reaching people, connecting with people, and connecting with the community that you're building. What do you see as the next stage of what you've built?
It's starting to happen, actually, because the curate from the church next door popped in literally 3 weeks ago. And she said, I've got an idea. And I said, okay, what's your idea? And she said, well, you know how I'm curate down in Belper as well, and we've started to notice that there are a lot of very lonely people. So we've approached the cafe next door, and we've asked them whether we could have like an informal meetup of anybody who wants to join in. She said, they don't have to do much. People just come in, order their coffee, and then come in and have a chat and join a table. Would you mind if we did the same thing here? And it's like, let me think, would I mind? Yeah, that sounds terrible. I nearly bit her arm off. And I just said, that's why we are here. We're here for community. So we've started that, and we had the first meetup. There were 9 people who came to the first one, and they said, oh, so we'll see you again in 2 weeks, and which is great. So it's every other week, and that's a kind of regular thing. And then that grows, doesn't it? Because each person that comes will kind of be able to tell other people. So from the point of view of more people coming, that's great. But for the point of community, then I can kind of say to other people, well, we have this group on a Friday morning every other week. Would you like to come at such and such a time? And then there's kind of more continuous things going on. We've got a book group, we've got a knitting group, we've got a weekly chatty table. That's a national scheme for lonely people. So we've got somebody who facilitates that, and that happens every Thursday. So it feels to me like it's very small beginnings. The chatty table only has kind of 4 or 5 people, but we had 7 last time. So, it just feels like it's tiny, tiny steps, but that community sense is beginning to grow.
I love that. And it's that idea that even baby steps will get you to the top of Mount Everest, as long as you're moving forward. And I think that's so important to remember. Well, I have a real heart and passion for cafes, because when I was training at the Olympic Training Center, and I couldn't work a full-time job, I had a part-time job working for the church that I worked at, and I ran the coffee shop, because it was a modern evangelical church with thousands of people, and they needed someone to run the coffee shop. And that's what I did. And I had 52 volunteers that I ran and all those things. And, I know the value of what you're doing is so huge for the community. And, to be able to have a group of people who are volunteering their time as well to support you, and to have that profit share option is just awesome. And I think, a big key takeaway for me is that idea of do what you can with what you have with where you're at, right?
Yes.
You had a vision, and the vision found you, and the opportunity came there. But that, someone might be listening to this and thinking, well, I don't have, the money to set up, a cafe or whatever. But what you've just heard is the story of someone who had a vision, and the vision found her, the two things found each other, and you were able to work with a community center, a community hall, and create a regular cafe, which obviously it's not running 24/7. It's running during certain time slots as well, because then the community hall can be used for other things. But that's creating regular in interactivity within the community hall. So I love everything about what you've said. And I think it also shows that with a vision and a little bit of, insight, you can move things forward. Because, obviously you had this opportunity where they came to you with the same idea that you went to them with effectively. But there's people who are listening to this podcast that probably have an empty church hall or an empty community hall, in their neighborhood that they could actually go to and say, hey, well, if I run a coffee shop during these hours and we profit share, would you be open to that? And people would probably say yes,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was approached actually by a friend of ours who's a vicar, and he said, could I go into their church because they wanted to set up a little community space, not all the time, but would I be able to go and kind of give them a few pointers? So yeah, absolutely. You can start really, really small. You don't have to have. I mean, I look at it and I think, oh, if only we could have this fancy coffee bar and all of that kind of stuff. But actually, it doesn't matter. That's just appearance. And while we live in a society now that's obsessed with appearances, actually, we have people coming in now and saying, "Oh, it's really lovely in here. There's a lovely, warm feeling."
Mm.
And that's the point. It's creating the ambience rather than worrying too much about, investing in how it looks and comfort and equipment, fancy stuff. You can do, as you say, um, what you can with what you have.
Well, you
Yeah.
can go into a swanky cafe and not get that feeling, right?
Yes.
So it's that
And I have
idea.
to, yeah.
Yeah, it's that
Mm,
idea that you're creating an energy that people are attracted to, that people want to be around, that
mm.
that energy of generosity of spirit, that connection piece is just huge. I love everything you're doing. Someone's watching live, Sue. She says, "I love the way personal ideas can spark ideas in people around you and how visions can grow when you follow your dreams." And I just, what you imagine 12 years ago and what's happening now in real life and what will come down the line,
Yeah.
it's really magical. And sometimes do you feel like I got to pinch myself, this is really happening?
Oh, completely, completely. And now, having kind of set up this particular cafe, which is not self-supporting yet, I do have to be there. But I hear of other people, or other people say, "Oh, we'd really like to start something like this." And they'll ask me how I started. And when I first started, a friend of ours said, "Actually, this might be the start of like a little string of well kitchens around Derbyshire." And in a way, I kind of think, I wonder whether that actually could happen and how that would work. I'd love it to be the case because I think it's just kind of bringing community together and rebuilding communities that have died, sadly.
Really
Yeah.
move over Starbucks and welcome the well kitchen. A well kitchen in every town. Yeah, tell me about the name. I love names, and you've called it the well kitchen. What does that mean for you? Obviously, the gathering well, which you mentioned earlier, but does it have multiple meanings?
For sure. So I said I was listening to a sermon in church, and the sermon was actually about the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman at the well, and how she did not have a place of belonging because she had to go to the well when nobody else was there. And that was what kind of made me think about how there are people who don't have that sense of belonging. So that was where it started. And a well as gathering place. And then it also is the well kitchen because of promoting well-being and kind of being well connected with other people. So that's kind of the sort of metaphorical sense of the well kitchen. But also, I suppose within that we try to source well, we try to be as sustainable as possible. So we think environmentally, we shop local, we have all those sorts of ideas. And so well, I suppose, is the center of all of that.
I love that so much. Well, thank you for sharing your story, Amitha. I really wanted you to come on, especially since, when we started working together was before the well kitchen came about. And then of
Mm.
course it was through, like you said, doing that vision for what you would love. And, and we still do it in our superhero boot camp. The very first thing that we do is
Yeah.
get a vision for our
Yeah.
future. What would I love? And what does
Mm.
life look like if I learn how to leverage social media professionally? And
Mm.
it's just really cool to speak to someone who has actually achieved that. And so I
Thank you.
appreciate you coming on today. If people want to find you, where can they find you online?
Online. So on Instagram, I'm at the _well_kitchen. I am on Facebook as the Well Kitchen Derby. And I've got a website which is www.thewell-kitchen.co.uk.
If you want to come into the cafe, where are you located?
We are at Hazelwood, which is a tiny village in Derbyshire. I suppose the closest town is Duffield, or the closest village is Duffield. We're off the Wirksworth Road, so as you go out of Duffield towards Wirksworth. So I hope I'll see you, Joy, at the very least.
I got to figure out where that is in the country, but I will figure out how to get there.
Derbyshire. Derbyshire. We're not too far away from Oxfordshire.
Excellent. Well, I will definitely come and check it out. Maybe we'll do a Tech Pixie meetup there. That would be fun.
Ooh, that would be really fun.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now
I
you're
would love that.
talking.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about how do we get people back together again, so because we've been online for so long, trying to do things
Mm,
back in person again. And we've been slowly reintroducing in-person things, but that would be a fun one because I think people around, we've got tech pieces all over the United Kingdom from, Cornwall all the way to the Isle of
mm.
Skye and, parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. So and we've even now got some European tech pixies. So we for sure could do could do a meetup there. But
Come on down.
I'm so grateful to you for giving us the time, for sharing your story, and sure some tech pixies who are interested in starting their own cafes or their own version of the well kitchen will be in touch.
Get in
Thank
touch. Absolutely. I'd love to chat with anybody who wants to do this sort of thing, for
no,
sure. Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
So I love doing those interviews, especially when I get to see how people's lives have turned out. And of course, Amita was a little bit nervous coming on, but she did a brilliant job and shared a great story. So I really hope you will go check the Well Kitchen out on Instagram, on Facebook. And if you get a chance, pop in for a coffee. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch up with you next week.